The 1960s gave us cinematic giants: Psycho, 2001, Lawrence of Arabia. But while the spotlight burned on the big names, dozens of masterpieces slipped into the shadows. Some were too bold, too strange, or just too ahead of their time. In this video, we're unearthing 15 more hidden gems of 60s cinema, films that dared to disturb, mystify, and emotionally devastate. They're haunting, they're beautiful, and they will blow your mind. Let's start with 5 that slipped through the cracks of history. The Face of Another, 1966. Directed by Hiroshi Teshigahara. What happens when a man loses his face, and with it, his soul? In The Face of Another, a salaryman suffers severe facial burns in a factory accident, leaving him bandaged, isolated, and spiraling into despair. But hope arrives in the form of a mysterious psychiatrist who offers him a solution: a hyper-realistic custom-made mask, a new face, a new identity, a second chance. But what begins as liberation slowly becomes obsession, and then madness. Once the man puts on the mask, his behavior changes. He becomes bolder, more manipulative, and dangerously detached. He seduces his own wife while pretending to be a stranger, testing not just her loyalty, but the boundaries of morality itself. Is he still himself, or is he someone else now? The mask doesn't just cover his disfigurement, it awakens something buried deep and dark. Hiroshi Teshigahara uses surreal visuals, clinical framing, and haunting architecture to turn Tokyo into a psychological maze. Shadows stretch unnaturally, conversations become alien, and reality begins to blur. The film doesn't just question identity, it dismantles it, asking whether personality is skin deep or soul deep. There's a subplot, too, of a disfigured girl whose story parallels our main characters, reinforcing the theme that outward appearance can be both prison and weapon. As the narrative tightens, so does the grip of paranoia, and the audience becomes trapped in a man's unraveling psyche. Rarely has a film so effectively blended science fiction, philosophy, and psychological horror. The Face of Another is not just unsettling, it's unshakable. A slow, cerebral descent into identity loss and moral ambiguity that'll have you questioning who you are long after the credits roll. Quartermass and the Pit, 1967. Directed by Roy Ward Baker. Dig too deep, and you might uncover something you were never meant to find. In Quartermass and the Pit, construction workers in London stumble upon what seems to be a World War II-era bomb. But as scientists arrive to investigate, it becomes clear this isn't a bomb. It's something older, and not of this earth. Inside the object are insectoid remains, long-dead alien life forms that defy explanation, and their discovery begins to trigger inexplicable psychic phenomena across the city. Professor Quartermass, the skeptical hero of the British sci-fi series, becomes our guide through this spiraling mystery. He suspects that these creatures are Martians who manipulated early human evolution. In other words, they may have created us. And that horrifying legacy is still buried in our DNA. The film plays like a ticking time bomb. As researchers dig into the past, they begin awakening primal, violent instincts in the population. Riots break out. Hallucinations multiply. Ghostly visions of mass extermination appear in people's minds. It's part alien invasion story, part evolutionary horror, and part apocalyptic thriller. Where Quartermass and the Pit shines is in its ideas. It isn't interested in jump scares, it's interested in psychological unease. What if humanity's darkest urges, violence, xenophobia, destruction, weren't just flaws, but programmed traits? Traits left behind by something not human? The special effects may look modest today, but the atmosphere is chilling, the concepts ahead of their time, and the social commentary piercing. It foreshadowed the X-Files, Prometheus, and even Annihilation, years before those stories were ever conceived. It ends with a city in chaos and a chilling realization. We're not just descended from apes, we might be descended from monsters. That's a twist that'll stay with you, and make you eye your own instincts a little differently. This Sporting Life, 1963, directed by Lindsay Anderson. Frank Manchin is angry, not just at the world, but at life itself. This Sporting Life is the story of a coal miner who becomes a rugby star, But unlike most sports dramas, there's no glory here. Frank is brutal on the field and even more brutal off it. His success brings money and recognition, but it can't buy him the one thing he truly craves: love. Richard Harris delivers a raw, electrifying performance, so intense it feels like he's ripping himself apart on screen. Frank's relationship with his landlady, Margaret, played by Rachel Roberts, is the heart of the film. But it's no fairy tale. Margaret is fragile, grieving her husband's death, and she's terrified of Frank's volatile energy. Still, he pushes. He demands. He doesn't know how to love, only how to fight. The film shifts between brutal match-day brawls and quiet, painful domestic moments. Every punch Frank throws on the field echoes the emotional blows he dishes out in private. And when he finally gets what he thinks he wants, it's too late. He's already ruined it. Lindsay Anderson's direction is stark and cold, capturing industrial England in all its post-war gloom. There's no romanticism here, only gray skies, aching souls, and people desperate to escape their circumstances. The story peels back the myth of the self-made man and exposes the damage that masculinity, pride, and emotional repression can do. It's a sports movie, yes, but it's really about loneliness, about how some men mistake violence for intimacy, and how success means nothing if you're emotionally bankrupt. By the end, don't cheer for Frank, you mourn him. And you realize this isn't a tale of victory. It's a tragedy wearing cleats. The Trial, 1962, directed by Orson Welles. You wake up one morning and are told you're under arrest. You ask why, and no one answers. The Trial, based on Franz Kafka's haunting novel, plunges you into a nightmare without logic. Anthony Perkins plays Joseph K., a mild-mannered clerk who finds himself prosecuted for an unnamed crime. He never learns what he did. He never gets a clear answer. And as he chases justice, the world becomes more distorted, more absurd, more terrifying. Orson Welles transforms Kafka's literary dread into a visual maze of oppression. Corridors stretch infinitely, rooms tilt and loom, doors open into nothing. Bureaucrats drone on with rehearsed lines. Every person Joseph meets seems to know something he doesn't, and no one wants to help. The horror here is existential. Joseph isn't tortured or beaten. He's ignored, dehumanized, shuffled endlessly through a system designed to break him by confusion. The system doesn't need violence. It wins by being incomprehensible. Anthony Perkins, just a year after Psycho, is mesmerizing. His Joseph is jittery, confused, desperate to assert control, but always one step behind. His face says it all. Surely this is a mistake. But the tragedy is, maybe it isn't. Maybe society has no room for someone like him. Welles doesn't just film the story, he sculpts it in anxiety. Scenes blur together, sound and space overlap. You feel like you're drowning in paperwork, surveillance, and cold indifference. And in the end, when the hammer finally drops, you realize, this wasn't a trial. It was an execution from the start. This is one of the most unsettling films ever made, not because of blood, but because it reflects a system we still recognize today. A world where innocent people are lost in red tape, and justice is just a word. Latru, 1960. Directed by Jacques Becker, most Prison Break movies are thrilling. Latru is transcendent. Based on a real attempted escape from La Santé prison in Paris, Latru, or The Hole, is about 5 inmates plotting their breakout. But Jacques Becker isn't interested in cheap thrills. He shows us everything. Every bolt unscrewed, every floor tile lifted, every spoon of dirt hidden away. It's realism at its purest, and it's absolutely riveting. We follow the new cellmate Gaspard as he's welcomed into the group. He seems trustworthy, but trust is dangerous here. As plans unfold, tensions rise. One false move could doom them all. And Becker doesn't rely on dramatic music or shaky camera work. He uses silence, rhythm, and detail to build unbearable tension. Much of the film was shot with real ex-con Jean Carodi, who had lived this story. That authenticity bleeds into every scene. You feel like you're there in the cell, crawling through that narrow tunnel, holding your breath with them. What's remarkable is the emotional weight underneath the surface. As the escape nears, we see bonds form, friendships that feel real, not scripted. And when the inevitable twist comes, it doesn't just shock, it hurts, because by then, you believe in these men. You root for them, and their fate becomes personal. Latru isn't just about escaping prison. It's about hope, betrayal, and the fragility of trust. Becker passed away shortly after completing it, making this his final masterpiece. It's a swan song so powerful, so precise, it sets the gold standard for every escape film that came after. If you think you know prison movies, watch Latru. It digs far deeper than the rest. The Incident, 1967. Directed by Larry Pierce. It begins with a quiet subway ride. It ends in absolute psychological carnage. The Incident is one of the most terrifyingly real films of the 1960s, and yet almost no one talks about it. Set almost entirely on a late-night New York City subway train, the film traps 17 strangers in one car. They're ordinary people, a young couple, an elderly man, a gay man hiding his identity, soldiers, children. They don't know each other. They have nothing in common. And then, two young punks board the train. These aren't over-the-top movie villains. They're disturbingly believable. Played by Tony Musante and a young Martin Sheen in his chilling debut, the duo begins to bully, mock, and torment every single person in the car. What starts as petty harassment escalates into threats, humiliation, and a slow-burning game of psychological warfare. And here's the gut punch. No one does anything. Everyone just watches, paralyzed by fear, hoping it'll pass. Larry Pierce's camera keeps you confined inside the car. You become one of the passengers. You feel the tension build with every glance, every insult, every moment of hesitation. The film becomes a brutal study of bystander syndrome, where good people fail to act not because they're bad, but because they're scared. There's no music, no cinematic lighting. It's grimy, grainy, and claustrophobically real. And that's what makes it so powerful. The violence isn't stylized. It's horrifyingly mundane. The fear doesn't come from jump scares. It comes from recognizing yourself among those silent faces, wondering, would I have done something? By the end, the incident doesn't offer redemption. It offers reflection and discomfort. It forces you to confront your own limits. It's one of the most intense, harrowing, and socially conscious thrillers of its era, forgotten by time, but unforgettable once seen. If, 1968. Directed by Lindsay Anderson, it starts in a British boarding school. It ends in revolution. If is a film that dares you to question authority, and then burns it all down. Directed by Lindsay Anderson and starring a young, magnetic Malcolm McDowell in his screen debut, this surreal satire is part coming-of-age drama, part political rebellion, and part fever dream. It doesn't just break rules, it obliterates them. The story centers on Mick Travis, a rebellious student fed up with the oppressive traditions and ritualistic brutality of his elite school. The prefects, upperclassmen given power over others, are cruel and sadistic. The teachers preach conformity. The punishment for stepping out of line, public beatings, humiliation, and mental torture. But Mick doesn't bow. He simmers with contempt. He smirks at injustice. And slowly the film starts slipping into surrealism. Scenes are shot in black and white for no explained reason. Logic begins to bend. Dreams and reality blur. It's as if the institution's suffocating grip is warping the world itself. And then, in the final act, the students don't just resist, they rise. Guns appear, smoke billows, and a full-blown student-led revolution erupts on the school grounds. It's explosive, terrifying, and symbolic. Did it really happen? Or is it just Mick's fantasy of rebellion? The film doesn't say. That's the genius of it. If is a critique of hierarchy, tradition, violence, and blind obedience. It came at the end of a turbulent decade, echoing the spirit of youth movements and anti-establishment rage bubbling worldwide. It captured that exact moment when the system cracked, and those underneath finally fought back. Malcolm McDowell is hypnotic, equal parts charming and dangerous. You never quite know if Mick is a hero or an emerging sociopath. But maybe that's the point. When a system breeds violence, even its rebels become terrifying. Bold, biting, and still dangerous after all these years, If is not just a movie. It's a call to arms disguised as a school play. The Servant, 1963. Directed by Joseph Losey. Power doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it creeps in from below. The Servant is a psychological thriller set in the elegant drawing rooms of upper-class London, but underneath its polished surfaces lies a deep rot of manipulation, class warfare, and toxic dependency. What begins as a simple employer-servant relationship becomes a twisted power play that completely reverses the roles. Tony, played by James Fox, is a wealthy young man who hires Hugo Barrett, played with chilling brilliance by Dirk Bogarde, as his manservant. At first, Barrett is the picture of obedience, soft-spoken, professional, deferential. But slowly, almost invisibly, he begins to unsettle the balance. He introduces Tony to his sister, a seductive young woman who's clearly more than she claims to be. He insinuates himself into Tony's personal life. He watches, waits, and pounces. As Tony begins to unravel, drinking more, doubting himself, retreating from his responsibilities, Barrett grows stronger, more confident. The power dynamic flips. The servant becomes the master. And what was once a symbol of aristocratic control is now a prisoner in his own home. Joseph Losey directs with icy precision, using mirrors, staircases, and long silences to build a constant sense of unease. Harold Pinter's razor-sharp script leaves everything slightly ambiguous, making the psychological warfare all the more haunting. At its core, The Servant is about control and corruption, how people give up power not all at once, but in small, poison doses. It's about enabling your own downfall without even realizing it. Dirk Bogarde is mesmerizing, a performance that shifts from subservient to sinister, without ever raising his voice. He doesn't need to. The manipulation is quiet, surgical, devastating. If you love films that simmer with tension, that explore the dark underbelly of class and identity, The Servant is an absolute must. It'll leave you questioning every polite smile and every open door. Burn, 1969. Directed by Gillo Pontecorvo. Rebellion wears many faces. Sometimes it even wears a British accent. In Burn, also released as Queimada, Marlon Brando stars as Sir William Walker, a cynical British agent sent to a fictional Caribbean island to stir up a slave revolt. But don't be fooled. He's not there to liberate, he's there to manipulate. The island's sugar is valuable, and he's there to make sure the right people control it. For Walker, revolution is just a business strategy. He finds his pawn in José Dolores, a fiery and charismatic slave who becomes the leader of the rebellion. Under Walker's subtle guidance, the people rise. The colonial government collapses. Victory. But then, betrayal. Walker, working on behalf of new investors, returns years later to put Dolores down. The same man who sparked the fire is now there to extinguish it. Burn is a scorching, morally complex film that rips apart the romanticism of revolution. It's about how imperial powers weaponize uprisings, turning hope into leverage and leaders into tools. Brando's performance is chilling in its cold calculation. And the film asks the question, is freedom still freedom if it was handed to you by your enemy? The cinematography captures heat, literal and metaphorical. Sweat glistens, flames roar. The tension between Walker and Dolores burns with philosophical weight. One fights for principle, the other for profit. By the end, Dolores refuses to sell out. Anne pays the price. And Walker, he walks away, until fate catches up with him. Directed by Gillo Pontecorvo, best known for The Battle of Algiers, Burn isn't an easy watch, but it's an essential one. It's not just about politics. It's about the cynicism that drives empires, the corruption behind every ideal, and the price of real resistance. If ever a film earned its title, Burn sears straight through your conscience. The Naked Kiss, 1964. Directed by Samuel Fuller. From its opening shot, a bald woman furiously beating a man with her purse, you know the naked kiss is going to shatter expectations. Written and directed by Samuel Fuller, this hard-boiled melodrama noir tells the story of Kelly, a prostitute who escapes her violent past and relocates to a quiet, picture-perfect American town. She wants a new life, a normal one. She becomes a nurse at a hospital for disabled children. She even falls in love with the town's most respected man. But, in true Fuller fashion, everything is not what it seems. Kelly's journey is a struggle for dignity and redemption, and she fights like hell to rise above her past. But the town doesn't want her to. Despite her kindness and transformation, she's still seen as damaged goods. And just when she thinks she's finally found peace, a romantic proposal from the town's wealthy philanthropist, the rug is pulled. Her fiancé has a secret, a horrifying, unforgivable one. The film veers into dark territory without warning. The story becomes a savage critique of hypocrisy, power, and who gets to be forgiven in polite society. Kelly, once shamed for her past, becomes the only one brave enough to confront real evil. And the town? It turns on her again. Samuel Fuller directs with pulp fury, blunt, loud, and fearless. He doesn't tiptoe around taboos. He kicks the door open. Yet, within the chaos, there's real emotional weight. Constance Towers delivers a remarkable performance as Kelly, hard-edged but vulnerable, broken but unyielding. She isn't just a femme fatale, she's a survivor. The naked kiss doesn't play by the rules. It exposes them, mocks them, and then tears them apart. It's a crime story, a morality tale, a feminist cry, and a twisted slice of Americana, all rolled into one. If you want a film that starts at 100 and never looks back, this hidden gem will leave you breathless and bruised. The Pumpkin Eater, 1964. Directed by Jack Clayton. Some films scream. The Pumpkin Eater whispers. And somehow, it hits even harder. Anne Bancroft stars as Jo Armitage, a woman drowning beneath the weight of motherhood, marriage, and quiet emotional despair. She's had numerous children, possibly more than 10, and yet she's told that her emptiness must mean she wants more. Her husband Jake, played with casual cruelty by Peter Finch, is distant, unfaithful, and resentful. But Jo keeps trying to be the good wife, the good mother, the good woman. What unfolds is a devastating portrait of repressed female pain. Jo isn't loud, she isn't hysterical, she's just quietly falling apart. Every conversation is a knife. Every scene is a mirror showing how little control she has over her own life and body. When she learns about Jake's affairs, her world begins to crack. And yet, she doesn't explode, she implodes. The pain turns inward, and the film, shot in stunning, sometimes claustrophobic black and white, mirrors her interior disintegration. Empty rooms, silence, shadows. Harold Pinter's script is sparse but sharp. Every word matters. Every silence matters more. Jack Clayton's direction never moralizes. It just observes. And Bancroft? She delivers what might be the most haunting performance of her career. There's one scene, in a soundproof booth, unable to hear the world, where her quiet breakdown says more than any monologue could. The Pumpkin Eater explores the female condition in a society that equates womanhood with reproduction, obedience, and emotional endurance. It's about the price women pay for being everything to everyone, and how they slowly disappear in the process. It's not flashy, it's not explosive, but it's honest and it cuts deep. Watch it when you're ready to feel something real. I Start Counting, 1969. Directed by David Green. Coming-of-age stories are rarely this chilling. In I Start Counting, Wynn, a teenage girl played by Jenny Agutter, lives with her adoptive family in the outer edges of a London suburb. She's 14, innocent, imaginative, and she has a crush on her much older foster brother, George. That alone sets off alarm bells, but then she begins to suspect that George might be the serial killer responsible for a string of recent murders in the area. What follows is a haunting, slow-burn psychological thriller wrapped in teenage longing and emotional confusion. Wynn doesn't confront her fears. She buries them. Her suspicion grows alongside her infatuation. She's repulsed by George, and yet she wants him to be innocent so badly that she clings to denial. The film drips with tension. Every glance, every whisper, every time George comes home late. You don't know whether Wynn is imagining things or whether her instincts are terrifyingly accurate. That uncertainty fuels a constant unease. But I Start Counting isn't just a thriller. It's about the blurry, dangerous space between childhood and adulthood. Wynn is discovering her body, her emotions, and the harsh truths of the adult world all at once. The murder mystery becomes a metaphor for the loss of innocence and the betrayal of trust. The cinematography captures a stark 60s England caught between eras. Suburban sprawl, empty lots, new housing estates rising like concrete tombstones. It's bleak, but beautiful, and it makes Wynn's emotional isolation feel even more palpable. Jenny Agutter is astonishing. Her performance balances naivete with intelligence, desire with fear. You ache for her. You fear for her. By the end, the question isn't just, is George the killer? It's, what does it mean if he is, and what does it mean if he isn't? Either answer is devastating. The Sarraosa Manuscript, 1965. Directed by Wojciech Haas. What if you opened a book and fell into it, only to realize that every story inside was about you? The Sarraosa Manuscript is one of the most mind-bending films of the 1960s, a labyrinthine fantasy from Poland that defies all logic and genre. The story begins during the Napoleonic Wars, when a soldier finds a mysterious manuscript. As he reads it, we dive into the tale of Alphonse van Woerden, a nobleman traveling through Spain who falls into a dreamlike series of adventures involving haunted inns, seductive sisters, ghosts, Kabbalists, bandits, and duels. But here's the twist. Stories within stories. One character begins telling a tale, and that story leads to another, and then another, until the entire narrative becomes a hall of mirrors. You lose track of what's real, what's dream, and what's hallucination. And that's exactly the point. Director Wojciech Haas creates a film that feels like falling into a fever dream. The cinematography is surreal and hypnotic. Costumes shift, timelines fracture, logic vanishes, and somehow you can't look away. The themes are endless: fate, time, storytelling, temptation, honor, madness. The film plays like a 17th century acid trip. It inspired artists like Luis Buñuel, Jerry Garcia, and even Terry Gilliam. Martin Scorsese called it a personal favorite, and yet to this day it remains largely unknown outside hardcore cinephile circles. What makes it unforgettable is its commitment to mystery. It never explains itself. It seduces you with possibility, then leaves you to interpret the meanings, or accept that maybe there isn't one. The real question isn't what happens in the Sarraosa Manuscript. It's, can you let go enough to experience it? This is cinema as magic, pure, strange, and alive. The Shooting, 1966. Directed by Monte Hellman. In the vast emptiness of the desert, even sanity begins to fade. The Shooting is a minimalist western with the soul of an existential horror film. Shot on a shoestring budget, this forgotten gem stars Warren Oates as a bounty hunter and Jack Nicholson in one of his earliest and eeriest roles. As a mysterious, possibly unhinged gunman, they're hired by a nameless woman, played with icy detachment by Millie Perkins, to lead her through the desert. But she won't say why, or where they're going. As the journey unfolds, tension grows. The woman remains cold, cryptic. The terrain becomes more desolate, the sun more punishing, and another rider seems to be stalking them, a ghostly figure in black. What begins as a slow, traditional trek devolves into psychological collapse, paranoia, death, delirium, and then one of the most chilling endings in Western history. Monte Hellman strips the genre bare. There are no saloons, no showdowns, no heroes. Just emptiness, suspicion, and fate grinding away at human resolve. The silence is loud, the stares go on too long, and the feeling in your gut tells you something very wrong is coming. Jack Nicholson, even in his early years, is magnetic. He's dangerous, but you can't look away. And Oates gives one of his most underrated performances. A man trying to do what's right, but unraveling by the mile. By the end, when the truth is revealed, it doesn't shock, it haunts. Because in the world of The Shooting, answers don't free you, they destroy you. This is a Western made for those who love mystery, dread, and ambiguity. It's short, strange, and unforgettable. A cult film that deserves far more attention than it ever got. You've just uncovered 15 mind-blowing hidden gems from 60s cinema. Films that challenged, disturbed, and redefined what movies could be. Which one shocked you the most? Or did we miss a forgotten masterpiece you love? Drop it in the comments. If you're passionate about lost treasures and cinematic secrets, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video with a fellow film lover who needs their mind blown too.